Welcome to What's in a Game. On today's show, Russell Westbrook opts out. Will he be leaving Denver next year, or will he have a new destination? I'm Grace Jean here with my co-host Will Jones. Denver does have news on the roster building front, as we find out per Mark Stein this morning that Russell Westbrook is going to indeed opt out of his player option for the upcoming 25-26 season. Will, what was your first reaction to this? And we'll break down some of the options that both Russ and Denver have in front of them.
First reaction was that it was completely expected. If you read Jake Coyne's offseason guide or listened to podcasts about this, he can make more money by opting out and re-signing since, the new minimum's higher every year. The salary cap goes up, so he could make more by coming back. What I wasn't sure of was how this helps the Nuggets with the repeater tax. Because I saw Jeff tweet about that. And I thought I remembered Jake writing something about that it's like a win-win even if he opts out and re-signs, that it can help in some way.
Peter tax, I'm not sure. So one of the things that we've discussed in our off-season shows, and we're going to have a lot more on this kind of like cap minutia so that fans can understand what the sort of both tools and limitations are at Denver's disposal. One of the things with veteran minimum contracts is that the player gets more money after like a certain number of years of service, and Russ is like well into that past that threshold, he and DJ, to where, for example, this season when you sign a veteran minimum contract, the player gets like $3.3 million, but the cap hit and also the amount that's counted towards the luxury tax, which determines additional money that the team has to pay toward the league if they're paying a certain amount above it in salary, is only $2.3 million. So I'm not sure if
Jeff responded.
Oh, go ahead.
He said, since the repeater tax takes hold on one of the new league years, on July 1st, the Nuggets have $3 million less on the cap because Russ is opted out once the new league year starts.
Oh, interesting. But I would imagine it's interesting that they count it then and not at the end of the year when everybody's books are filled.
Yeah, he just says when the new league year starts, the Nuggets have $3 million less to add to the 2.5 times repeater tax penalty.
If Russ does sign a new vet minimum, I think the vet minimum, additionally, it's gone up because the salary cap is going to go up by 10%. So everything is scaled to the salary cap. So the vet minimum will also go up. So it'll probably be closer to almost $4 billion that Russ gets. And then only like 2.6 million that counts towards our cap. Whereas if he had opted in, that player option is scaled to the money that he got and not the amount that was on our cap. So I think that's what the amount is. So maybe they save a little bit on luxury taxes. That's just a little bit of cap minutia to where it makes sense for both parties for Russ to have opted out, even if he were going to stay to Denver, which we're not saying is necessarily going to happen, but it is still an option. The other thing, Jay Coyne put out that Stat Squatch, our guest from last week, put out a tweet with a couple of different options if Denver wants to re-sign Russ that include the 1-year minimum, as I just mentioned, that has the according to him, it's a $2.3 million cap hit. So it sounds like the cap hit hasn't increased that much from last year. And you can also give Russ a 20% raise on the minimum using non-bird rights. We're going to be throwing these terms around all summer. There's a little bit of an echo, Will. I'm hearing a minimum there, or an echo there, sorry. What was I saying? So there are a couple of different tiers of things that you can use to re-sign your own players, and they're called bird rights because it was kind of the rule was originally like for Larry Bird, who had been with the Celtics for some amount of time, and they wanted to be able to give him some amount of money, right? One of the reasons that Bruce Brown left when he did is that Denver only had his early bird rights that gave him the opportunity that gave them the opportunity to give him a 40% raise on what he was already making. But obviously, Indiana gives him way more than that would have been. Um, and that's because he'd only been here 2 years. We have Russ's non-bird rights that allows you to give any player that you're retaining a 20% raise on what they made. And Russ has obviously only been here for 1 year, so that's why it's the lower number. So they could give Russ that. That would result in a $4.4 million cap hit, which is not great for Denver because we are again scraping up against that second apron. And the last option would be Denver giving Russ the taxpayer MLE, which is up to a $5.7 million cap hit, depending on how much of that mid-level exception or MLE you use on Russ, which would obviously foreclose the opportunity to give that to another player. So it kind of depends on what the options are there. And so a lot of different things on the menu for both Russ and Denver. That's just the Denver side, right? Question I'm gonna ask you in terms of, like, what will happen. Russ probably has a couple of options ahead of him outside of what Denver can offer, or at least, like, theoretically, because we don't know what other teams might be interested, but do you think Russ will be back next year?
I kind of feel like he will.
Do you think that's more because of what will be offered to him by other teams?
I think it's more
Yeah.
about like the opportunity still. Like I don't think things went sour enough in Denver for him to lead me to believe he really
To
wants
just leave to
to
leave.
leave. Yeah, he could be offered more money. Like I do believe he
Yeah.
outplayed the minimum for sure.
Oh, I mean,
Um, yeah,
unquestionably, yeah.
so but he's already made so much money, but it's like you can't blame anyone for taking as
No,
much
not at
money
all.
as you can. So that makes it difficult. But I do think he likes Denver. I think he felt like the fans were happy with what he was bringing, like especially the home crowd. I think they showed him a lot of love. I don't know how much he paid attention to like media stuff because they're a little more hot and cold on Russ, of course. But I think playing with Jokic is still one of the best opportunities to try to get a championship besides him trying to like go to OKC and have his little swan song.
Everyone talks about
And
OKC, and I just don't see Russ as a Thunder like, I don't know why Presti would be interested in that, if I'm being
I don't
completely
know
honest
either,
with you.
besides just vibes, besides
It's
just,
just the connection that he has to the
yeah.
franchise and, yeah, vibes,
But it's
but
so true.
that's just
Like he
yeah.
would not play on that
That's
team. There's
like
so
he's, like,
many
not
people ahead of him on the
yeah,
list that it's like it
yeah.
doesn't make any sense. But he could, just come back, play in the regular season for them,
Can you
like in
imagine
spots.
the discourse if Thunder players were like, "I can't believe Dagnall is playing Russ over Aaron Wiggins."
Yeah, it's just so messy.
This
But
is
what other contender could he maybe go to that could
so
offer him a bit more, like the
the thing
Heat
is,
or
I'm not
something?
like, depending on how you define contender, if you're defining it as loosely as possible, some of the
Yeah.
teams that I've seen being bandied about, and I don't know if these teams are actually interested or if people are just suggesting it, or suggesting that they might be interested because these are teams that are desperate for starting-ish caliber point guards are Dallas and Sacramento. I don't
Hmm.
necessarily think that Russ is a great fit either place, if I'm being totally honest. I don't think that he's, like, the answer for them, but those are also weird franchises that you could see, like, making a weird decision there. Dallas would have access to, I believe, some portion of the full mid-level exception. I don't think it would be the entire thing because of how close they are to the first apron. So just thinking about, like, what's the competition in terms of what teams, would be interested, and Dallas right now, they have no room below the first apron, so they couldn't offer him the full mid-level. They could probably just offer him the taxpayer mid-level, which is up to what we could offer too, but I don't know if Denver wants to use their taxpayer mid-level on this, or maybe they do because they just wanna run it back, and I don't know that they would use it on anything useful anyway. Sacramento, on the other hand, I think has a bit cleaner of a cap sheet. So they are well below the first apron. And they've got 10 players signed. So they could offer us the full mid-level exception and you could like that's a franchise you have no freaking idea what they're gonna do. They didn't choose Luka Doncic on draft night. They traded away Tyrese Halliburton. They traded away De'Aaron Fox, and now they need a point guard. Uh, so they might give Russ the full mid-level exception. Like, I could actually see that
If
happening.
he really wants that extra money, he can go there, but I feel like that's not a good situation for him.
I mean, it's a lot of extra money, though. So for me, it's like I think that the situation in Denver is good enough that if the money is the same, he'll stay. But I don't think that I don't think it's bad like it was, like, in the Clippers where it's, like, minimum, "Okay, yeah, I'm gonna leave and go somewhere else," even though well, no, because actually he opted in and it was, like, a whole thing. I don't think the Clippers wanted him back. So there's, like, some mutual stuff there, but, different dynamic. But I don't think that it was, like, good enough to where Russ would turn down 4 times the money somewhere else.
Yeah.
Is it good
Well,
enough that he would turn down 2 times the money somewhere else if it meant that he was further away from his family? This
yeah.
is the thing that we got in the articles that came out in the aftermath of the Malone and Booth firings, that he was, like, visiting his family in LA on weekends, and I was just like, "Okay, whatever." But apparently it was, like, an issue for some players in the locker room, which is the only reason that this kinda story gets out. Like, I don't think he's gonna go to an Eastern Conference team, for example. And maybe Dallas is less, attractive for that reason, but, like, Sacramento is the same distance, like, flight-wise, or less it's less because that's like a, I don't know, hour and a half flight as opposed to, I don't know, was it 2 hours from Denver to LA? So that I think that's also a factor, and maybe that's why those are the 2 teams that are being kind of thrown around and not, others, is that factor as well.
Snoozer, how are you doing? Thanks for joining. He said he thinks Russ could be disappointing on another team or will end up disappointing. And I do wonder, do you think GMs around the league are attuned to the Jokic effect and how much are they thinking, well, Russ outperformed that because he's with Jokic, he has good chemistry with him. When he played with the starters, he was good. I don't know if he can kind of bring that to our team.
This is gonna be the ultimate case study of that question,
Yeah, that's going to
honestly,
be
like,
interesting.
genuinely, because if you look at Russ's production last season, um, what way outplayed the minimum. Like, I think made himself one of the better taxpayer MLE candidates on the market, if not the best one, in that range. I wouldn't go so far as to say that a team would be willing to take the risk of giving him a full MLE unless they're Sacramento being Sacramento. Um, but just objectively, like, oh, of all the guys that were on minimums or taxpayer MLEs last year, who outplayed their contract the most is probably him and, like, Gary Trent Jr. just because he made a lot of shots, right? Similar, like I said, to Malik Beasley the year before. Objectively, like, if it were not Russ, like, if it was any other player, I think that player is like, "Oh, that player's definitely gone." Like, there's no reason that you and I should be having this conversation of like, "Oh, will he be back in Denver next year?" Like, probably not if it weren't Russ. On the other hand, if you see a team that's like, "Oh, this guy, like, gave them, like, $15 million of value, like, 5th starter to 6th man kinda money, of value last year, and that's what we're gonna give him," then you're like, "Okay, nobody understands the Jokic effect." Okay?
Yeah.
Uh, so I think there's, like, a sliding scale of outcomes here, and we're gonna find out, and we'll definitely I think that's a good framework to sort of analyze whatever the ultimate outcome of this is.
Russ may not be the best like case study for it though, just because he's older and like already has such a long
That's true.
reputation
That's
among the league.
true.
But because I feel like if you're
It's one of those things where
younger,
that factor, if you have all of those factors and the fact that it's Russ and his long career and he has this reputation, like, people know, like, this is like, we know what this player is, and then he still gets the bump after that, like, that would be, I think, the ultimate. Like, I think if Russ gets a even if it was Sacramento, if he got a full MLE, I think that's even more impressive, in terms of, like, the Jokic bump than KCP getting $60 million on his last deal, because I think KCP was, like, playing closer to that level. Um, and was younger, like substantially younger. So
Yeah, Russ was almost out of the league just by reputation, like almost
yeah.
unfairly, I would say. Like, I don't think that that was true. It's just
Yeah.
a
And
lot of the
again, like
perception.
the reason that we're talking about like will he be back next year is because I think Denver has reason to want him back. I think that he added value to the team. But do you want Russ back? And if you do you have a ceiling on what you would offer in terms of what Denver's options are?
I'd still just give him the minimum again. I think anything else other than that is not so great. Like we don't have to go fully into detail on Ryan's last pod where he was talking about PWAT and the CB extensions possibly, but he just had a sentiment that he hopes that the Nuggets tried to get the best deals as possible for them and they'll buck the trend of giving early extensions or like showing the players they're going to pay them a little more because they're such a great organization or whatever the hell mindset that they have and be a little bit more, play
Shrewd.
hardball a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I only want Russ on the minimum. Sorry if that's like offensive to Russ or Russ stands or whatever.
I mean, forget offensive. Like, let's say another team offers him they don't have the non-bird right. So that's the thing is like I'm thinking in the sliding scale is minimum to taxpayer MLE. I would not love if we had to give him the taxpayer MLE, but again, like I just don't trust that they're gonna do
No, we
anything
can't do
better
that.
with that. I would like them to sign restroom minimum and do something useful with the
Yes.
taxpayer MLE. But to you, is the taxpayer MLE a red line? Like you're like, no, it's not going to be that.
I think
It's
you,
either minimum or at worst, it's going to be the non-bird rights, which unless like just as like a math thing, they will not be able to sign someone to I think the taxpayer MLE and sign another minimum guy if that's already the case, even if Russ takes the minimum, even more the case if we have to do the non-bird rights with the bigger cap hit, if Dario is still on the books.
right.
Like, that's
Yeah.
just not even we might not have 15 guys on the roster next year because of that.
I just want to use
Yeah.
the exception for another depth piece if possible. And a lot of those names aren't very persuasive in terms of how much impact they can make. Like I look at some of those options and I'm just, not that excited about it, but it's going to be better than Dario who just didn't play.
Oh, well, yeah, of course,
Yeah.
but I'm saying
So,
but that's not up to us. Dario has a player option,
yeah,
right?
I'm just operating on the optimistic side of he's not going to be back and just hoping we have that slot open. But of course, that may not happen.
I don't know. Your optimism knows no bounds, Will. This guy has a free $5 million sitting in front of him, and you're asking him to close the suitcase and walk away.
Man, like you want to just sit on the bench for a whole season and do nothing, or go do something with your life and play basketball while you still can somewhere
Or
else.
you opt in and force them to buy you out.
Oh,
Like,
that's true too. God damn it.
like he's got all the leverage. So it sounds like we're both in agreement that we want Russ back. There are some people that disagree, and I think we should pay credence to some of those arguments. Russ is pretty volatile, both as a scorer and as a just he's not a steady presence off the bench, right? He was steadiest when he was playing, starter level minutes with Jokic. And so the question is like, is he able to scale down his role? If, for example, you wanted to create a bigger role for a Jalen Pickett or create even more minutes for Peyton Watson. I think there's merit to that. I really do, especially because of a lot of what we've been talking about over the last year when it comes to production and being different than impact and fit. And so there's an opportunity perhaps that some people see for addition by subtraction, which is why they would be willing to just let Russ walk, even if it was like the minimum. I disagree with that for a couple of reasons. I think even if they brought Bruce back, there's a serious motor deficit on this roster. Um, both in the regular season and the playoffs, like it's just a thing, but especially regular season, the level of caring, and you could say it was just like the whole thing with the coach and the GM. I don't fully buy that, but even if you did, um, the fact that we had one high motor athlete in our rotation, it just stood in such stark contrast to all the other good teams in the league. Uh, except maybe the Celtics, who none of them are really like super high motor guys. Even like Derek White has sort of like scaled down, sort of similar to Christian, like after he's taken on that starter role. He was kind of that last year, but you see like championship hangover comes for us all, right? So I worry about just not having that. I think that is important just in terms of getting through the regular season, but also just picking other guys up. I just worry that not having anybody who is willing to, like, keep running and, like, fly around and all that means
Yeah.
we're just gonna be a really, like, drab team. I think there's this perception that the reason that the Nuggets only won 50 games last year is because of Russ, and I'm just like, guys, there were so
What?
many phases of this season where Russ, like, saved our asses, and, you can point to some isolated incidents of, like, the last game against Minnesota in the regular season, like, this or that clutch game, but it was, like, one of the like, the reason that Jokic wanted Russ is because he wanted a veteran point guard who could fill in when Jamal was, like, out or, like, bad to start the year. So I think it would be a mistake to just be without that. I don't know how much Jokic wants to play with Jalen Pickett. We're gonna see if that changes next year. Pickett has been around the team longer. Hopefully, he's better next year. I don't know why you would want fewer guys.
Yeah.
Besides just like there's this idea that like, okay, was it Malone's fault that guys weren't getting minutes, or was it because we had too many guys? Like I think you have to sort of pick a lane there. So those are my kind of initial thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think Russ, despite his inconsistencies, is one of the only guys who has his skill set on the team at his position, especially.
Yeah.
And that's pretty valuable. And usually he outweighs the bad. At least he did last season for me. In the playoffs, like I don't think he lost us the series versus the Thunder or anything. And he may
Yeah.
have been like not as impactful as the Clippers series.
I mean,
But
in the Clippers series, he was amazing.
yeah,
So it was like you could say the playoffs were a wash, and like again for a minimum guy, like what else can you ask for than just being like a net neutral in the playoffs?
yeah. So I really do want to keep him. The point guard position's already pretty shallow. We need even more ball handlers than we already did with him and Pickett and Murray. So losing him is just another one down that we're already going to have to replace that, which you could do like a Dennis Schroeder type thing.
Can you? Like, the only tools at our disposal are a minimum and
Yeah. Well,
a
you'd have to pay
taxpayer MLE, and you
you'd
have
have to
to
pay
assume
more for him and then use the minimum on like a different kind of other role player or something.
well, I don't know that you can even get Schroeder. Like, I'm not
Yeah,
sure
that's
Detroit
true.
doesn't wanna just keep him, and even if they didn't, maybe somebody else offers him the full MLE or more. He was a full MLE player on his last contract, and I don't did he underplay that value? I don't think so, right?
Yeah, but it's going
When
to be
like,
like
Brooklyn traded him because he was playing too well.
yeah, that's true. That was so funny. But then he like wasn't very good on the Warriors. That was so weird. What a weird season for him. But
Yeah,
him
but then he was
and
fine on the Pistons as that
yeah,
backup, so
but like maybe Dinwiddie, maybe I don't know. There's other names out there, but they're not like
right.
all that exciting.
No, I exactly. I think that the point of Russ last summer from the front office's perspective, separate from what we just discussed about Jokic, was like, okay, Russ is this upside play. We got the upside. Like, uh, if you're going with somebody else, you could say, okay, we're going new direction, we're going steady hand. But I mean, part of that is like, are you trying to if you get a steadier player, you're just probably never ever gonna play Jalen Pickett. To which, like at that point, I'm just like, I don't really understand what the point of that pick was. Yeah, it's a weird situation with our point guard room, and part of the problem is that we don't have creation or ball handling at any other position on ball. We just
Yeah,
don't. Outside of AG sometimes, and it's a weird roster construction issue. It's almost like honestly, like if AG were like still like the kind of on ball guy that he was in Orlando, which he shouldn't be because he's taken on a different role here in Denver, or MPJ or Christian were any kind of really like you actually believe it's happening, developing creator or ball handler, then this would be a completely different conversation, but they're not. Like we just don't have this function on another part of the roster right now. And so I think going from Russ to somebody else is a downgrade on a roster that's already like bereft of this skill. So that's another interesting sort of angle to take is like if they were going a different direction, if they wanted to break up the core, which I don't advocate for necessarily, to change that fact, that this would be a completely different conversation about Russ, like entirely coming back, because it's the thing with Russ is like if you're a team that like I don't think Sacramento makes all that much sense, despite they don't have technically a real point guard, but they've got other guys who can handle the ball. It becomes this diminishing marginal return. But on a team like Denver, where it's like literally like, okay, it's Jamal Murray and then nobody else, like in terms of on ball creation, like we really kind of need that more than other teams do. So I think that Denver would be in a tough spot if Russ just left. Other people don't necessarily agree with that. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
Snoozer asks, isn't Dario a taxpayer mid-level exception?
When you sign a player to a taxpayer mid-level exception or a mid-level exception in the previous year, that doesn't count against you being able to use that exception again in the next season. It's just about your ability to use the taxpayer mid-level is just where your salary cap sheet is that year, as long as you didn't already use it that off season.
So you get
you
a
would be
new
able
like
to,
level of
yeah,
exception depending on where you are on the
right. And
scale.
it doesn't matter if you used that exception last year. Yeah.
Cool.
It's actually unfortunate because when you think about like if Denver had been able to sign guys on taxpayer mid levels that played like around that contract instead of like Bruce like way outplayed it and then had to leave. Reggie probably played like to that level to be honest, but like they just didn't want him anymore, so they salary dumped him, whatever. We could have been accumulating these like $5 million contracts on the roster that we could have put together to make an actual trade package, but didn't. Just a thought there. And obviously Dario just like did not play to the level at all. But we might have him on the roster anyway.
Yeah,
we're gonna see what happens. If you like our content, please remember to click the like button and also hit the subscribe button. We're still trying to hit that 1,000 sub mark before the end of the playoffs. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our content, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. We're on Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple Music. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, etc. All our social links are in the description. And always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks.
It'll be fun if the Pacers win the finals.
It would be fun if the Pacers won the finals because it would mean the Thunder lost the finals. Losing can also be fun if it's not your team.
Yes.